All right, good evening. It is 6 o'clock and I'm going to call our regularly scheduled board meeting to order. And we are going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we are super excited to welcome back our elementary school students. So after a summer without, welcome Tomahawk Elementary School to lead us in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. And I would love it if you would come around and introduce yourselves, and if you could share with us what the best part of starting school again is.
There you go. Yeah, so these are our sixth graders from Tomahawk Elementary. They represent the safety patrol, volunteers that keep our schools safe. And we have a handful of them here who graciously came tonight. They're honored to be here, and they will introduce themselves, say their teacher's name, and the best part of sixth grade so far.
I'm Amaris, and my teacher is Mr. Kashka. My favorite part of sixth grade is having my best friend in my class.
Aww.
My name is Annie, and I'm in Mr. Kashka's class, and my favorite part of sixth grade is being with my best friend in my class.
My name is Asher, and my favorite part of sixth grade is my teacher.
Oh, that's even.
My name is Daphne. My teacher is Miss Alvarado, and my favorite part is how I feel a sense of community.
Oh, God, these guys are killing me.
My name is Arya. I'm in Mr. Kashka's class, and my favorite part of sixth grade is my integrated math program.
Oh. All right. Thank you all for being here. Meeting adjourned. All right. Okay. So next on the agenda here is to adopt the agenda. I'm going to go ahead and take a first and second, and then we're going to pause for a discussion. So could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Borgman.
Okay. As board president and the superintendent, we were notified of a board member who wanted to consider amending the agenda, so I will offer that.
Thank you. So, Madam Board President, I have a motion to amend the agenda. My motion is to move the discussion item 6.2, the update from the donation task force, to board reports, item 5.2, as that item has been brought to the board as part of the task force process to provide a board update and board discussion. And historically, board members provide their updates on the task force or committees during board reports. Discussion items that are brought before the board during the latter portion of the meeting are typically brought on behalf of the administrative team by the request of the board president or the superintendent, and so placement on the agenda indicates where an item is at, both procedurally and as a matter of practice before the board. Additionally, we have different standards for data and analysis on a topic dependent on where in the process of deliberation it is at. In light of the fact that this is a board discussion from board members and is not an action item brought before the board on behalf of the district or board president, a less rigorous standard given to board members during board updates is probably the appropriate place in the agenda for the update. I still want the update. I still want all the information in the presentation. I'm just asking for it to be moved. As far as I can tell, historically, precedent-wise, we've not had a board member present an update during the discussion process, and so it's not precedent, and so that is why I am bringing the motion at this time.
All right.
Okay. And I am happy to withdraw my motion and have that speak on the record if there is not a second. That's fine. But I wanted the statement to be a part of the record so we could designate and have it clear where we were at in the procedural process. I think one of the comments from the audience tonight was also that they believed that it was an item for like a board report and not an item that was a vote.
Okay. All right. So,
And if there's not a second, I can withdraw my motion, that's fine. I think I needed that to be on the record for this evening.
all right, thank you.
you.
Okay. So we will stay, I think in absence of a second, we will stay on the initial first and second to keep the agenda as is. Okay, so now we take a vote. All in favor, say.
No, I withdrew my motion.
You withdrew your motion for the
Yeah,
agenda.
so now we're voting on the agenda. All in favor, say aye to that.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. Thank you for that, and thank you for the heads up. I appreciate that. Okay, so this brings us to Part 1, the revenue neutral hearing. And the Shawnee Mission School District intends to exceed the revenue neutral tax rate, R&R, for the 2024-25 school year as established by KSA 792988. Johnson County calculated the Shawnee Mission School District's R&R at a mill rate of 49.035. The district intends to exceed this R&R with an estimated mill rate of 51.316. The district's revenue neutral rate, budget documents, and profile and needs assessment can be found on the district's website, budget and finance page. The purpose of Part 1 of the Board of Education's meeting, August 26, 2024, is to provide for a public hearing to consider exceeding this revenue neutral rate, which will then be followed by a vote by the board to approve exceeding the revenue neutral rate. If there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the Board of Education specifically about exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate, please raise your hand and come on. And if you want, you can come and just kind of maybe line up behind the podium. I don't know, I think that might be easiest. Thank you. And I will invite each one of you to the podium one at a time, and you will be given 5 minutes to speak. Our board clerk, Ms. Trenholm, will keep the clock running to help you keep track of your time. When you come to the podium, please state your name, spell your last name for Ms. Trenholm, as she is responsible for documenting the list of speakers. So this is a little bit different than public comment. And board members will generally listen during this time. Any comments regarding the proposed budget for the 2024-25 school year should be held until Part 2 of tonight's meeting. So this is revenue neutral, and then Part 2 will be the budget hearing. Okay, so come on up. You're right up there. So could you go ahead and tell us your name?
My name is Rose Geringer, Gerringer. I lived in Merriam for the past 25 years and grew up in the Shawnee Mission North attendance area also. So I have made a heavy investment in property taxes into the district. My 5 children did not take advantage of Shawnee Mission schools. My parents also sent me to private schools. So we have made a double investment in the education for my siblings and my children as well. There are 4 different funds listed on my property tax statement that help fund the school district, and then I heard earlier that there's a lot of community funding that goes in as well. So the statistics that I found online don't probably factor in all that community money as well. So we know that school funding has grown exponentially over the decades, yet college and career readiness remains stubbornly low, and there are enormous achievement gaps for low-income students. Simply spending more money hasn't and won't help students get the education they deserve and produce a qualified workforce. So while the funding continues to set records and is far above long-term inflation, less than 30% of Kansas high school students are on track for college or career, and large investment gaps persist again for those low-income students. Again, simply spending more money hasn't and won't make a difference, but identifying buildings that are improving could produce some ideas that could be replicated around the district. So I took a look at specific grades from the Kansas State Board of Education, an A through F grading system, and I can see that the elementary schools are, none of them get an A grade. 13 get a B, 19 get a C, and 2 get Ds. When we get to the middle and high school, it's really egregious. We are spending a lot of money, not on academics, and maybe you'll laugh at me like they laughed at my friend in Blue Valley when she said, let's get back to academics. They actually laughed at her. That is your job, to teach citizens to be good citizens and participate in our community. Having kids who feel good about themselves but can't perform, that doesn't do anybody any good. Our middle schools, we have 5 of them. No A's, no B's, 2 C's, 3 D's. Our high schools, we have 0 A's, 0 B's, 2 C's, and 3 D's. And again, this is from the State Board of Education. These are their MAP tests that they give to children. Let's see, what do they call them? The Kansas Assessment Program, CAP, under the operation of the Kansas State Board of Education. So we've got to do better. I can't give you any more money in good conscience because you're not spending the money that I have given you well. I would like you to take that into consideration, give your patrons in this district a break by at least going revenue neutral. And like somebody said in the public comments section before, you're going to run us out of here. You're out taxing people right out of their homes. Their homes are paid for, but their taxes continue to go up and up and up. So if you want to run us off, keep it up. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Next.
Getting old, we got to put my glasses on.
That's okay.
Sean Claycamp, I have two kids in the West District. I have a middle schooler now, God help me. I have been to a few of these revenue neutral hearings, and there's nothing we're going to say here that's going to change what you're going to do. The mills are set, the budget's set, so I realize that. And I also know you guys are doing your best. A few years ago, we had an SMSD bond yes sign in our yard over at 91st and Antioch, and I'm proud we did that. We have built some great schools in this district recently, and it's exciting that we've done that. Our kids deserve it. The Deemer deserved a new school. Certainly Pawnee deserved a new school. I don't know if you guys know this, but the Pawnee basement used to flood. It doesn't now because it's a brand new school and it's awesome. I'll say this, so as a lot of you know, I ran for school board 3 years ago, and when I campaigned, I spoke to a number of voters, a lot of voters actually, and several of them complained about property taxes and how the school used them. I remember one older gentleman in Lenexa complained about new playground equipment at Sunflower Elementary. I asked this gentleman, I said, did your kids go to school at Sunflower Elementary? He said, yes, they did. And I said, would you be complaining if your kids still went to Sunflower Elementary and there was a new playground built? And he said, no. And I found that pretty telling. One thing I know for sure, classroom educators and staff are underpaid, and it's a thankless job. I truly believe that. And we thank you for what you do for our kids. Now that said, and if I'm speaking out of turn, somebody correct me, but I believe that SMSD teachers on average are paid the highest of any in Johnson County, slightly edging out Olathe. And I'm happy about that because our kids deserve the best teachers. But another stat that I'm aware of is I believe last year 200 educators left SMSD. Some of that might have been retirement, some of that might have been a spouse leaving or whatever the situation was. But as I mentioned, our teachers are paid the best, but yet it seems like we're losing more staff than other districts. And again, I'm just speaking anecdotally, but this is what I hear because I pay attention. Are we doing exit interviews with these teachers and really listening to what they have to say? Are we taking a hard look at our plan and asking for real criticism and comment and then listening to hear what people are actually saying if it's not just accepted opinion? I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I saw a stat.
To the revenue neutral rate? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Clickham.
you bet. I saw a Department of Education stat here recently that since the year 2000, there's been an 88% increase in public school administrative staff and a 37% increase in principals and assistant principals. Meanwhile, teacher staffing has increased at 8%, which is in line with student population increases. Let me ask you this, are we tracking administrative staff in SMSD and increasing at this 88% rate? Because administrators cost more than teachers. I want teachers to be paid more. I've heard anecdotally stories of teachers that go to class, they take classes in the summer to get master's degrees, they get doctorate degrees, and the reason they do this is that's a way that they get paid more. I'd like to give teachers their summers back a little bit and maybe just pay them more just because they're doing a doggone good job. I'm not blaming teachers for getting these degrees. I understand it. That's the way the system works. A couple other things. When ESSER's funding was available, I know of several districts in the greater Kansas area that gave pretty significant retention bonuses each of the last 3 years to classroom staff. Some of those bonuses were in the several thousands of dollars, and that sounds pretty good to me. How did we account for our ESSER's funding? Were we judicious with it, or did we just spend it because it was a bucket of money that we could spend at that particular time? As we ponder the revenue neutral rate, I think the majority of us who pay taxes just ask that you spend the money as efficiently as you can and that you spend it as much on the classroom. Businesses, and I'm in business, business tracks money in a number of different ways, but one thing that they say a lot is they want to be customer facing with how they spend money. And I know SMSD is not a business, but I will say this, we do have a CFO. My great hope is that we do all we can to spend our money in ways that have the most impact on the customer, and the customer here is the student, the families, and to some degree the educators and staff. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say these things. I just ask that we please be smart with our money because eventually we are going to run out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak to the revenue neutral rate? Yes, come on up.
My name is Melissa Rooker, last name R-O-O-K-E-R. I live in the Shawnee Mission East attendance area, and I previously served 3 terms in the Kansas legislature and participated in the process of writing our school finance formula. I didn't come here intending to speak tonight, but I do want to just share a little bit of historical context when it comes to the topic of budget and mill levies and how we got where we are. This state was at odds over school finance in court for 2 consecutive court battles that spanned 20 years. And in that 20-year time frame, from the early 2000s until we rewrote the school formula in 2017, we were litigating and we were underfunding. We were not at a constitutional level. It took 3 years, 2017, 2018, and 2019, to do the legislative work necessary to deliver a funding plan and a distribution model that was acceptable to the court on both equity and adequacy grounds. But that plan took an additional 6 years to phase in. So last school year was the first year that funding actually achieved the constitutionally approved level that the court accepted. It has taken time, and during that time, we know the role that inflation has played. You hear it every day in the news media, and we know what it's done to prices. We feel it in our own pocketbooks. School districts are no different. Your food prices, your healthcare prices, your all of it, utilities, transportation costs, fuel costs, it all is affected by inflation the same way that our budgets are affected. There were comments made about an A through F grading system, and that's actually what propelled me to get up and speak to you tonight. There is no such thing sanctioned by the Kansas Department of Education. That is a manufactured structure from an outside special interest think tank known as the Kansas Policy Institute that has created this A through F grading system. The truth of the matter is Kansas has the most rigorous standards in the country for our state education standards. And the fight over funding has taken its toll. So state assessments are calibrated to our standards. We know our neighbors to the south in Oklahoma have just, their superintendent of education, without any public process, changed the rigor of their standards, changed the cut scores, and popped their achievement levels to like a 30% higher rating, and that just it doesn't reflect actual change in student achievement. Our graduation rates are improving. Our outcomes for kids who are in the at-risk and special education categories are improving. It does take time. These are children. It's not an assembly line. All to say that when you look at your property tax bill, there are certain fundamental realities to it. 20 mills on that bill are set by the state legislature, and this board has no ability to change the mill rate at all. There's the capital outlay fund, which is set at the maximum which the state allows, which is 8 mills, and that funds a lot of things in this district at this time, including salaries for certain employees who are not teachers but help keep our buildings operating, to free up funding in our baseline budget to help improve teacher salaries and improve staffing, which is the issue that has filled this boardroom tonight. So it's terribly important that we protect the ability of this district to maneuver and manage the budget appropriately. I would say that the other thing to keep in mind is the bond levy that's on the tax bill is there because the community voted to put it there. So again, that bond, the mills required to service the bonds that the community voted on are there. This board is not going to change that because it was a vote of the people that took care of it to put it there. The local option budget is where there is some discretion, and that is the funding that the state allows for local school districts and their patrons to do things at the local level through the money levied through the LOB that will help enhance what can be done otherwise without that funding in place. So I would urge the board to proceed with your vote because you are doing what's necessary to keep your district running. Thank you.
Thank you. I would invite others to come speak to the revenue neutral rate. One. Okay. Thank you to the three of you for speaking, and seeing no other interest in public comment, the revenue neutral rate hearing is now closed. And I am going to ask you, Dr. Schumacher, to read the recommended action.
Yeah, I recommend adopting the resolution to exceed the revenue neutral tax rate for financing the annual budget for the 24-25 school year.
All right, and I move, so I'm going to make the motion. I move that the Board of Education adopt the resolution to exceed the revenue neutral tax rate for financing the annual budget for 2024-2025 school year. Do I have a second?
Second, Elfley.
All right. All right, so next is that April will read, I'm going to ask our Vice President, April Boyd-Nerona, to read the resolution. And we'll ask for discussion, and then we'll take a roll call vote. Okay?
Okay. A resolution expressing the property taxation policy of USD 512 Shawnee Mission School District with respect to exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate for financing the annual budget for 2024 to 2025. KSA 79-2988 provides that a levy of property taxes to finance the 2024 to 2025 budget of USD 512 exceeds the revenue neutral tax rate to finance the 2024-2025 budget of USD 512 be authorized by a resolution. Now therefore be it resolved by USD 512 that the 2024-2025 budget with the levy of property taxes exceeding the revenue neutral tax rates calculated for 2024 to 2025 is adjusted pursuant to KSA 79-2988 is hereby adopted. Adopted this 26th day of August 2024 by USD 512, Shawnee Mission School District in Johnson County, Kansas.
All right, so Ms. Trenholm, thank you for that. And Ms. Trenholm, you will ask for a roll call vote in which we would say, yes?
Do you want to do discussion before?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I do. Thank you for that. I'm skipping on ahead. Any discussion? Okay, all right.
Dr. Sinclair.
Aye.
Ms. Boyd Nerona.
Aye.
Ms. Borgman.
Yes.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Ms. Hembry.
Aye.
Ms. Owsley.
Aye.
Mr. Westbrook.
Yes.
Vote passes 7-0.
All right. Okay. This now opens Part 2 of this evening's meeting, the budget hearing. The proposed district budget for the 2024-2025 school year has been prepared and distributed to the Board of Education members and is available to all interested patrons from the treasurer. The district's revenue neutral rate, budget documents, and profile and needs assessments can be found on the district's website, budget and finance page. The purpose of Part 2 of the Board of Education meeting, August 26, 2024, is to provide for a public hearing on the proposed 2024-2025 budget as required by KSA 79-2929. Board of Education action on the proposed budget will occur during Part 3 of the regular board meeting as noted in the agenda. We will use the same process for the revenue neutral rate hearing, so please raise your hand if you would like to speak specifically to the issue of the proposed budget, and maybe come on up behind the podium. Okay, I'm going to give it one more second to see if anyone wants to speak. All right, so seeing no other interest in public comments, the budget hearing is now closed, and this now opens Part 3 of tonight's budget, the regular meeting. All right, thank you, team. Okay, we are at item 4.0, correct? 4.1. So we have minutes, 6 different minutes from meetings dating back to July 22nd, unless there are any other, or if there are any changes or edits to those minutes, I'd like to take them all at once. So I'd like a motion to approve items 4.1 to 4.6.
Move approval, Borkman.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Boyd Nerona.
Oh, all right, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we are on to communication items, 5.1, Superintendent's report. Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sinclair.
You bet.
Wait for the screen to come up. There we go. All right, thanks everyone for a great start to the school year. We are so glad to have our students all in the classroom as we begin the new year. I've known for a long time how incredible the Shawnee Mission School District is, and I continue to be so impressed by all the ways our community supports our students and staff. Before we officially began the year, I mentioned multiple times how this is a community that faces challenges head-on and works tirelessly to ensure students and staff feel a sense of belonging. We've already faced some very tough challenges, and I'm so grateful for how this community has shown its support. We are truly one Shawnee Mission. As I visit classrooms, I'm so happy to see new connections being made and learning opportunities underway. Thank you to our students, our educators, and our families, and our extended community for all the ways you've been all in and getting us off to a strong start for the new school year. Everyone in our community has a chance to recognize the outstanding educators in our community. Nominations are currently open for individuals to be named Shawnee Mission Teacher of the Year. From these nominees, the Shawnee Mission School District has the chance every year to nominate one elementary and one secondary educator for the Kansas Teacher of the Year program. The deadline to nominate is August 30th, 2024, and we'll include links and more information in the recap, which we will email to all families and staff later this evening. All Shawnee Mission staff members are invited to submit an original work of art to be included in this year's staff art show. Those who submit artwork to the show have the chance to earn a monetary prize through the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation. One artist will receive a $250 personal recognition and a $250 grant in support of their building's art department. Their selected work of art will join the district's staff art collection, which will be featured in the CAA gallery space annually from May until June. Again, we'll include a link for more information in the recap for those who are interested. The student family team, in collaboration with various internal teams, student culture clubs, and community organizations, is excited to host this year's multilingual community event, expanding on our annual bilingual back-to-school night. This event aims to celebrate the district's rich diversity while providing families from all backgrounds with resources, support, and a sense of community. This event is free and open to all SMSD families. We'll include a link to more information in the recap. And finally, the newest episode of Shawnee Mission Mic'd Up is now available. In episode 2, Dr. Brittany Gonzer, our Director of Professional Development, and I we're really excited to highlight the new Rushton Elementary School. It's an amazing space. Hopefully everyone's seen it. We were joined by Principal Christy Fornell, Debbie Coleman, the fantastic secretary who's been there for a number of years, and we highlighted the new home of the red-tailed hawks. We'll include a link in the recap for anyone who's ready to listen, watch, or follow the show. And that concludes my superintendent report.
I didn't cut that one yet.
It's good, I think.
All right, thank you for that superintendent report. This brings us to 5.2 board reports. So I'm going to start with Mr. Garcia. Do you have any updates from SMAC PTA or the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation?
Yeah, I'll start with SMAC PTA. Was able to attend alongside you and Dr. Schumacher their event where they brought in all the feeder patterns together, their PTA boards for some camaraderie and educational sessions, and it was just a great opportunity for all of them to be amongst each other, and it was really great to be there with them, and I think a lot was learned there, and a lot of them are really excited to get the year started. In terms of the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation, last week they held their strategic planning session that allows them to fully understand their role in our community and what they want to achieve in the next few years, and it was really great to work alongside them on that day to provide some insight from our perspective, but also the community, and again, just seeing how they want to function as a group and continue to support the efforts of our school district. It was incredible to watch and be a part of, so I know they're looking forward to another great year too. That's all I have.
Thanks. It was great to be a part of the School of Instruction. That is a annual tradition that allows former and past officers to share their knowledge to incoming leaders and how to run their events in short, prevent any kind of gaps and activities or events slipping through the cracks. So it's a fun event. All right, that would be Ms. Borgman. Any updates from KASB Board of Directors?
Yeah, there was a KASB Board of Directors meeting this past weekend. Big focus was on teacher retention and just the surveys that KASB is doing to provide data and help inform and guide superintendents, and would actually like to discuss that with you a little further, Dr. Schumacher, and just I know that we capture a lot of that data ourselves, and maybe KASB might be a good option for us to kind of validate, or maybe take another look from an independent source, so to speak. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you all is that the nominating committee will be dissolved after this year, and the reason is we felt like when you're part of the nominating committee, you may not be fully aware of all the roles that KASB does. And so the board of directors really felt like we may be better suited for that role. And so you'll still have the opportunity, April, to take part in that this year. But after that, it will be part of the KASB board of directors role. Just again, for a more full, because they have a more full understanding of what KASB does on a day-to-day basis.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Ms. Owsley, any updates on the
So yeah, the
KASB
KASB legislative task, or not task force, but legislative committee meetings met at the same time as the board of directors, and it was really nice to see everybody from across the state. And we are putting together the platform for adoption at the meeting in Wichita They are going on the listening tour, so to speak, coming up here pretty soon. KSB will be here in our district. We're hosting, and that's when board members can come and listen to what will at that point be like a more final draft, but still available for editing and tweaks. So, and then ideally, we then provide our feedback prior to the vote in Wichita.
Has that format changed a little bit? Is it all board members, or is it the officers and legislative chair? Do you know if there's
To attend which? The
listening
case-
session?
Board members are invited to attend, so all of our board members are invited to attend.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, let's see, where are we at? We are at Policy Review Committee. Any updates there?
We have a large number of policies that we're told we're going to get a chance to take a look at and review, so we have an active meeting coming up, but at this point, we have no recommendations for the board.
Okay, thank you. Finance and Facilities Committee, we have a meeting this Thursday, August 29th. It begins at 4 p.m. Feel free to tune in. Those are live streamed. And then the donation task force you'll be presenting during discussion items. So I believe that concludes, yes, our board reports. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Boyd-Moreno.
Yep, I'll just mention one thing that did actually occur at my first and last nominating committee meeting, is that we did take a minute to look at the onboarding process that's currently in place for board members. It was enlightening to see what all of the 13 or 14 of the designated persons that were on the committee came up with, experienced, and hope that others coming behind us won't have to experience or will have a more robust experience. So that was kind of the highlight of that before, as Jamie mentioned, that they decided that the committee would no longer meet. So I just wanted to let you all know that, yes, even though we're here, we are still thinking of those that are coming behind us, that will sit with us, and that have gone on that can still share that insight of what we do and the impact and importance of our role.
Any good ideas?
There were lots.
Okay, all right. Pretty good about that. Okay. And then did I cut off anything on the real world learning kind of opportunities there? No. Okay. All right. Thank you all for those board reports. That brings us to 5.3, board financial reports. Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, not a whole lot of action in July with spending. The one thing I think I would note is on the ESSER, we do plan our final retention payment in the month of September. It'll be $1,400 for all of our existing employees who we've retained from last year, so that's a great celebration. Beyond that, Russell and I will stand for any questions you may have.
Okay. Well, look, any questions? I'm just going to maybe add a comment that the use of our ESSER funds has been documented pretty extensively on the district website. So if anybody wants to see how those funds have been used and applied, you can go to the budget and finance page. Those would be there. We've talked about them probably almost at every single board meeting. And then at a state level, there's also an accountability report at the ksde.org. If you search ESSER, E-S-S-E-R, you'll find statewide accountability report on the use of those funds in Kansas, including Shawnee Mission. Okay. All right. So I see no discussion points, so we are now at item 6.1. So we're moving on to discussions. And we'll begin with the health benefits renewal.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to kick this over to Dr. Higgins, and he has a guest with him, which I'm sure he will introduce.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Schumacher, Dr. Sinclair, and the entire board for the opportunity to share some information with you tonight regarding our benefits renewal. With me tonight is Dave Johnson, who is our primary CBIZ contact. And as a reminder, CBIZ is our benefits broker for the district. Together, we're going to share some information regarding our 2025 benefits renewal. You also have an agenda item for your consideration later in the meeting. It's an action item related to the health insurance renewal with Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Of course, as usual, we would like to remind everyone that anything that we do should be in service in some way to our mission and our strategic plan. Of course, we know that we wish to create an inclusive culture in an engaged community, thus creating those robust learning opportunities for our learners to achieve at their fullest potential. We talk about students achieving academic success, developing personal resilience and interpersonal skills, and we know that for this to happen, we must put talented adults around them. We then need to assist these adults in their health and happiness in an effort to retain them year over year. One way that we do this is to provide extraordinary benefits. In the memo that accompanies the action item tonight, you'll see that we reference Strategy 3 from our strategic plan that states that we will enhance our community-centered environment to recruit and retain diverse and exemplary educators, staff, and families by being the best place to learn, work, and connect. And of course, we think that there's a direct tie to benefits and this strategy. The information that will be shared with you tonight has already been presented to and is supported by our Benefits Committee and was also shared with the board last May. The health insurance renewal rates you will see were used by the IBB negotiations team last spring and are reflected in the negotiated agreement for the 24-25 school year. And so with that said, let's dive into some of the renewal information. There is some data here, so Russ doesn't get to be the only person that references numbers. I'm stealing a little bit. The first part of the presentation begins by showing our current insurance carriers and renewal dates. I'm not going to dive into this slide very much, number one, because you can't see it very well, but we're going to talk more about some of these items here in a little bit. Essentially, this table details each of our coverages, the carrier that we use, and the renewal date for each of the benefits. Let's now do a quick review of our 2024 plan year. So the plan year that we are currently in and what that renewal looked like this time a year ago. And I'm going to have Dave spend a little bit of time talking about that.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. This page simply goes over the results of last year's renewal. Just very briefly, last year's renewal increase, and this would have been effective January 1st, 2024, of the Blue Cross plan was a 2.7% increase in premium. The only changes there, there were some changes on the prescription drug formulary. Some of those drugs moved around different categories, et cetera. And then the deductibles on the qualified high deductible healthcare plans, which are hooked to the HSA's health savings account, had to increase a little bit based on federal guidelines. Those were the only changes. There were no changes on any ancillary benefits, dental, vision, life, et cetera. So a very good renewal last year.
Before we jump into the medical renewal, I do want to share a little bit of information on our ancillary lines and our voluntary products that are offered to our employees. These benefits are all employee paid. Here you will see the ancillary benefits offered by the district. Dental is renewing with no change in rates. Vision insurance is currently in a rate guarantee and won't renew again until January of 2029. Life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment, and voluntary life are all under a rate guarantee through January of 2026. And our short-term disability is being renewed with Sun Life with no change in rates or benefits. Now, we did have several changes that occurred within our voluntary products. One of our current carriers is leaving the marketplace, and so our third-party administrator, Benefits Direct, determined it would be best to test the market in all of these areas to ensure that our employees are getting the best product and the best rates available. So very quickly, our cancer coverage is the carrier is changing to Sun Life based on the fact that Prosperity Life is exiting the marketplace. Accident, the carrier too is changing to Sun Life based on Prosperity exiting the marketplace. Critical illness, the carrier is moving to Aflac based on market evaluation. And then all of our other carriers are going to remain with the current carriers. So that would be hospital, indemnity, theft, legal coverage, long-term care, and our employee assistance program. All of those are remaining with our current carriers. I do want to bring special attention to our employee assistance program, or our EAP as we call it. Pending your approval this evening, our EAP will be administered through our current carrier, which is CuraLink. This is a benefit that is available to each and every one of our employees, and the district actually covers the cost of that program. CuraLink was able to offer a 3-year rate lock guarantee We've been very pleased with their service over the last 2 years, and so we are recommending renewing that contract with them. That 3-year renewal is a consent agenda item for your consideration this evening. Okay, let's transition to the medical plan. Obviously, this is a big item. As I had mentioned earlier, everything that you're going to see on these slides coming up was presented to our Benefits Committee last May for their input and their recommendations. As a reminder, the Benefits Committee is an advisory committee made up of classified staff, certified staff, and administrators. They don't approve or reject anything. They offer their recommendations and their input. The recommendation from this committee was provided to you, the board, last May, which ultimately led to a specific dollar amount that could be used for benefits as part of the IBB process. And as such, the district contribution you will see in a few slides is the dollar amount that was used as part of the IBB negotiations. As much as I would like to dive into all this medical renewal and stuff and talk about why it's going up or down, I'm going to let the professional do that. So Dave, you get the next couple slides.
Thank you. A lot of data on this slide. Basically, the gist of this is that your claims are up this year from last year. When the insurance company provides a renewal, their actuaries determine what they think claims are going to be next year. That's based on your immediate past paid claims. Your claims on a per member per month basis, all your claims for the year divided by all of the members that are on the plan have increased from last year to this year by 14%. And that's above trend. Trend is more like 9 to 10%. Your large claims over $150,000, those actually increased more. Those went from 19 of those claims last year to 27 this year, and that's 27% higher than the prior year. Your prescription drug expenses, basically the number of prescriptions have remained the same this immediate past 12 months versus the prior, and yet the expenses are up by a little over 8%. All of that being said, the very positive part of this is that 77% of your members are incurring claims of less than $3,500. So over 3/4 of your folks are really, $3,500 is a lot of money. I'm not saying that, but it's very low in terms of a medical claim. That's a very positive statistic. So to roll to the next page, these first few points here show you the per member per month cost for all 6 of your plans. You have 6 plans that employees can choose from. At this point, we're going to talk a little bit about that. The original requested renewal from Blue Cross was a 10.8% increase. We were able to get that negotiated to 9.5. The only change on the plan, that'll be effective 1/1/25. The only change on the plan will be a slight increase in the deductible on the qualified plans. And again, that's an IRS guidelines. Those go up generally annually to keep them qualified. The only other change in that really, and it's effectively been taking place already, is the HMO plan, the Blue Care HMO plan that you have in place is closed to new membership. So any new employees that are coming to the district, that's not going to be offered as an option to them. So the next slide shows you actually the average of what the increases have been for the last several years. So green line is each individual increase over the last several years. Gold line is the average of those increases. And so make sure I can read that. Since 2017, your average increase has been 4.4%. Over that time, trend has run generally, annual medical trend, the annual rate of medical inflation has run 8 to 9%. So you're still doing very well as an average over the last several years.
Thank you for that, Dave. So this is where we ultimately landed based on the numbers that Dave just shared and the 9.5% increase. This increase led to 3 options, each of which were presented to the Benefits Committee, and those are seen here on the screen. Option 2 was the unanimous recommendation of the Benefits Committee, which increased the current district contribution by 9.5% to a total of $894 per month. This slide here compares the 2024 rates to the proposed 2025 rates. As you see on the slide, with the district contribution of $894 a month, several of our health plans are free for employee-only coverage. Actually, I believe that 4 of the plans are completely district paid at the employee-only tier, which is awesome. Additionally, the 2 high-deductible plans at the employee-only tier come with a district contribution to an HSA, which also is a great benefit for our employees who are on those plans. This last slide here shares some additional information related to deductibles, out-of-pocket maxes, co-pays, things of that nature. Dave, is there anything specific you want to point out on this slide?
Just a couple of changes. Again, in those first 2 plans, in the qualified plans, those deductibles are going up by $100 each.
As we wrap this up, I wanted to let everyone know that open enrollment for our employees is scheduled from September 30th through October 18th. All employees will be receiving the benefits guide that contains all of the benefits-related information in the coming weeks. Again, thank you all for the opportunity to share this information tonight, and Dave and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Johnson and Dr. Higgins. And if, Dr. Schumacher, you don't have anything, I'm going to look up and down the dais here for any questions. Yes, Ms. Borgman.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for being here tonight. We have a lot of recent college graduates in our district. So what are we doing to educate our new employees to make sure that they are fully aware of all of these benefits and what means what?
Yeah, really good question. So each of our certified employees sits through an orientation meeting where Drew Stom, one of our benefits coordinators, and Jennifer Lumley provide them a fairly comprehensive overview of all of the medical insurance options that are presented to them. They will answer any questions that they have. Additionally, it's really nice having Drew on our team because he will sit one-on-one with any employee who has questions about the medical offerings available to them, almost in a counseling session. In addition to that, during open enrollment, yes, it is a self-guided process, but we do have counselors that are available. Our employees can call in if they have questions on their benefits as well and what they should sign up for. They have those available to them as well.
All right, great question. Anyone else? Yeah, Mr. Westbrook, were you?
Well, Ms. Boardman really anticipated my question.
All right.
I'm glad to hear the answer because I think it's so very important for particularly our new hires and our younger new hires to understand the extraordinary value of this benefit. And sometimes when we're young and healthy, that doesn't speak to us. So we have to be persuasive without sounding any kind of an alarm. I appreciate your efforts to educate those folks on this opportunity.
Thanks. Dr. Schumacher or Dr. Higgins, can you maybe speak, this reflects a great deal of work. Can you speak to how the Benefits Committee relates to the presentation that was provided today?
Want to? Go ahead.
Yeah, so everything that was presented tonight really comes a lot from CBIZ. But it is presented to our Benefits Committee in the spring. We have quite a robust discussion with our Benefits Committee about the offerings, about the options, and we want their input and their recommendation in terms of how to apply that 9.5% increase in this case, how we want to apply that moving forward.
The one thing I would add, that the last Benefits Committee I was in, we heard very directly that our staff wanted us to look at more opportunities, more options for family insurance. So they felt like more could be done with the family insurance options. And so Dr. Higgins, Mr. Johnson have already started that work this year, right? In investigating ways in which we can perhaps drive down some of that cost for our employees next year.
Thanks. And could you remind us who serves on the Benefits Committee?
Yeah, so it's a a joint effort. There are classified staff members, there are certified staff members, there are administrators, building administrators who serve on this, on that advisory committee. I would say 15-ish people in total.
All right. So some hard decisions kind of moving forward too to address. So thank you all for that work. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we are now on to item 6.2, the donation task force report, and I have asked our board vice president, Ms. April Boyd-Nerona, to facilitate this agenda item. Given that I am the elected board member from the East area, and the focus of this task force is really on this attendance area. So it would be a little bit inappropriate for me, I think, to facilitate this discussion and quite honestly, potentially a disservice to the East area students. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Boyd-Nerona for next steps.
Okay. And so I will turn it over to the task force to report and begin the discussion.
I think I've been given the privilege of starting this conversation. I represent a task force of 3 board members, and I understand there's going to be a PowerPoint. Is that right on this? I love PowerPoints. I don't know why you people need sight gags here, but you know, we were asked to take on the responsibility of taking a look at our policies and practices related to community contributions that are made to support schools, and also the migration of the conversation went to support funded positions by the school district. So that was a process that we engaged in with several public meetings and gathering together of data, which is still a matter that's in process. I would like to suggest that we will have a discussion about what the task force has presented tonight. And I would like to, at the risk of being a little bit iconoclastic here, I'd like to move that we would have that discussion, and that at the end of that discussion, we would then determine whether there are additional steps that we as a board need to take to move forward or not, but that we ought to have an open discussion about this. So can I put that motion on the table to discuss the task force's recommendations?
It doesn't need a motion. We can just discuss it.
Okay, all right. Then I would consider a privilege to participate in that discussion, and let me suggest that we can move forward to cover the other slides, and then maybe with the support of those slides as an overview of what we've done, we can talk about what we think about what we've done and what we might consider doing moving forward.
Let's move forward with the presentation.
Thank you. David, do you want to share the purpose that we arrived at the first meeting, or would you like me to?
You go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going to cover a handful of slides. Like David mentioned, we did have 3 publicly noticed meetings for the donations task force, June 18th, July 19th, and August 9th. This is the very first time Shawnee Mission School District Board of Education has had a task force of any kind, so we have certainly learned some things along the way. The purpose that we arrived at our very first meeting was to provide policy guidance for administrators and the Board of Education to ensure that gifts, donations, and bequests support our mission of equal opportunity to a high-quality educational experience regardless of a student's address or the economics of the community in which the student resides. We were all very united in that as a task force about that being our purpose. The second meeting, we focused in quite a bit on data, and one thing that I want to clarify is that for my fellow board members, we don't actually have any governance oversight of PTAs or educational foundations. All that we have to go on is the donations that we approve as a board. So you'll see item 8.04 for tonight is an example of that. So most of those donations are actually going to be for capital or staffing needs. We don't have records of every teacher appreciation lunch or every school carnival that might happen. We don't have access to all of that data. The key findings were that over the previous 2 school years, schools with less than 20% of students on free or reduced lunch in Shawnee Mission received 80% of building designated donations, totaling $1.4 million to 16 schools, compared to $91,000 for schools between 20 and 40% of students on free and reduced lunch, and $276,000 for schools with more than 40% of free and reduced lunch. 60% of those donations are actually accounted for by these community-funded positions that we're talking about. And if you look specifically at community-funded positions, over the previous 2 school years, 97% of those donations went to schools with less than 20% of their students on free or reduced lunch. Our current practice is another thing we looked at in that same meeting, so sort of asking the question of how are staff resources being allocated in the district right now. Dr. Dan Grumman came and presented, and I want to really commend our administrative team for the incredible thoughtfulness that goes into the way that we staff our schools. It is based on a wide variety of factors. So building needs, we do those needs assessments every year as a district. The budget, we look at ELL students on with IEPs. We look at churn within a building, the number of students overall in a building, the number of students on free and reduced lunch. So it is a very rigorous process that our administrative team is using to dedicate staffing in the district. We do have 10 elementary schools that are Title I, which means they receive some additional federal funding. And I don't think I knew this until Dr. Grumman came to present, that we're actually prohibited in considering the Title I status of a school and making those staff allocations. So we can't say, oh, that school is probably going to qualify as title, give them one fewer interventionist than we would typically give them. A couple of these slides are actually from Dr. Grumman. This just shows you some of those pertinent positions that we really do base the staffing on need. The couple of things I would note here is we had quite a bit of conversation about some places that we as a board have made a real focus in providing across the district. So things like interventionists and social workers and instructional coaches have not historically always been one per building, but this board has made it a priority to invest in those positions to make sure that every school has a social worker, a full-time social worker, every school has a full-time instructional coach, and every school has at least one full-time interventionist. And I will save my commentary for later. So these slides, again, just explain all of the things that our administrative team is looking at with those staffing allocations. Building needs assessment, they're actually going back and looking at, is it MAP or Kansas State assessment, Mike? Maybe both. Test scores, they review the strategic plan, input from the leadership team, and the budget to make adjustments to the current FTE. Yeah, so we do really just, I think there's an incredible level of thought that our administrative team uses in dedicating those staffing resources across our district, which I really appreciate.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Embry. So we asked the district to kind of take a look at where Shawnee Mission falls in line with other districts in Johnson County as well as the state. And Shawnee Mission is the only school district in Johnson County, and from what we can gather across the state, that allows community-funded positions at individual schools. And, with regards to the recommendation, this is a focus on community-funded positions. I think there's, thankful for this opportunity because I do think there's quite a bit of misinformation out there. So again, this is just a focus on community-funded positions versus like PTAs. And next steps will be that the task force recommends that this be moved to the Board of Education Policy Review Committee, which 3 of us serve on, to consider policy to govern community-funded positions. There is not a specific date set for the next policy review, but we are actively working to get that date set. And once it is set, it is publicly noticed. So this includes the sunsetting of any, community-funded position after the school year. So anything that the board has approved for this school year will remain, and then we would provide thoughtful transition for the the school years after. And, we are very thankful that the community has shown up for students. And, we do not want to discourage community support at all, but really just going back to the mission of, the task force is very united in Shawnee Mission's mission of equal opportunity to provide a high-quality educational experience regardless of a student's address or the economics of the community in which the student resides. And that concludes the task force recommendations, findings, and we'd be happy to entertain discussion questions that our fellow board members have regarding this issue.
David, I know you had expressed to wait until after the presentation. You're welcome to start the discussion.
Well, I will tell you that I have an enormous appreciation for the fragility of the most important asset of this community, and that is engagement from the community. And there's a statement in innovation, in the innovation profession, that says if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it's about innovation, break it. That's not what we want to do here. That's not what we want to do at all. Products that are manufactured by competitive companies will sometimes find an expiration date. They're taken off the shelf and they're replaced with something better. So I don't think we want to remove this opportunity from the shelf and simply say our job is done. I think we have to make it better. That's what we're supposed to do representing our constituents as school board members, I think. At least that's my way of taking something like this on. This is not a big problem, but if we waited for it to become a big problem, it would be more difficult for us to address. So I think our job is to anticipate things that are developing that may become big problems, which become more difficult to resolve when they get big. Nor is this a tiny problem, and our willingness and wish to invest in time and effort to address it now is not because we're being petulant at all. There's nothing more sacred to me than the engagement of our community. That's what has made this school district so terrific. So that fragile quality of engagement is something I would protect. It's a secular sacrament, in my view, and it's got to be protected. I think we need to listen. I think we need to find better ways of accomplishing the goals of community-funded positions. I don't, as a category, reject the idea of community-funded positions. If the Kauffman Foundation wants to come forward and conduct a pilot and measure that pilot as to what it might produce in terms of better outcomes for kids and produces better outcomes, and by golly, we've got to find a way to fund it. And that same would be true if someone in philanthropy or in the community wants to write a check to try to do something better for the kids in that school. And if we learn from that, then all schools perhaps deserve that. But we shouldn't sacrifice education excellence over the issue of equity. They're both important. We don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So let's tackle this problem. Let's do it without dividing up sides and wishing ill of one side or wishing victory for another. We'll get there. And I'll live with these words, and I'll live with the behavior of this board, that when we get to the conclusion of this conversation and adopt a resolution to make things better, that we will have improved conditions for our kids and improved education for our students. So that's the pledge I personally make to you, and I would be shocked if other board members at this table would not join me in trying to fulfill that pledge.
Thank you, David.
Ms. Boynton, can I speak? Thanks. So my hope is that this conversation leaves us with 3 takeaways. First, if nothing else, this conversation will affirm that Shawnee Mission has a strong track record of allocating our funds and our resources with equity across the district, and is committed to continuing this practice of one Shawnee Mission. Second, there is no doubt in my mind that every board member here has a really strong commitment to equity in alignment with our strategic plan. I think the challenge at hand is clarifying what this working definition of this equitable practice and assumptions on which the kind of the working definition is based, which I think will start this conversation a little bit more tonight. Third, I value being part of a district community willing to have hard conversations and to routinely self-evaluate our practices under the lens of equity and inclusiveness. I should mention that about a week or so ago into the work of the task force, we started receiving emails from the schools for whom a potential policy change would impact. And so I needed to share with this group, just for sake of transparency, and I committed, in that, I encouraged the committee chair and the task force members to reach out at least, intentionally reach out to the 7 schools that would be impacted directly by this potential change in practice. So I wanted to share that with the group just for full transparency. I did reach out and encourage that to happen. I'm a little disappointed that they chose not to have those hard conversations at this point with the 7 PTA leaders most directly impacted and the share exec students leading. You talked to all 7 PTA leaders?
No, I spoke with a school.
A school. So yeah, I'm just thinking about, so I'm a researcher at heart. I appreciate you doing that. I'm a researcher at heart, and so methodology is really important, right? How do we gather this is a really hard and complex conversation we're having. And so I think it requires a little bit more information gathering. And so I'd really hoped that we would have this conversation that was built on this foundation of an explicit conversation with at least the 7 schools who were impacted to understand the stories, to understand the why. But we'll move forward and maybe we'll get there. But I just needed to share with the group that I did reach out and ask for that for sake of, transparency. While I would have preferred having this conversation based on more input from those schools, I will fill in the gaps based on what I know as a patron and parent and alumni of the Shawnee Mission East area, as well as a lifetime of advocating for public education on behalf of Shawnee Mission students and youth across the state. I'm going to circle back to briefly to hit the message that Shawnee Mission has a strong track record of allocating our funds and our resources with equity. This is really critical, and I don't want that to get lost in this conversation. And just a couple of examples, I think Ms. Hembry already shared one of them in this kind of the conversations around staffing allocations. Another example of that is Shawnee Mission uses staffing guidelines to determine the number of elementary teachers per building based on the number of students enrolled by grade level. It is very intentional. A similar process is used at the secondary level. The rules guiding class size are the same regardless of school or attendance area. The same middle school sports or athletic uniforms are accessible to every secondary student. District staff ensure that bond projects and capital outlay cycle projects happen in all 5 attendance areas, whether adding accessible playgrounds, flexible classroom furniture, safe building entrances, privacy restrooms, or water bottle fillers. During this current bond cycle, the elementary school rebuilds have been in south, east, west, and north attendance areas, and will conclude with Tomahawk Elementary, which I believe is a building that might be 70 years old. Is that correct? It was built in 1955. It's time for a rebuild there. So the track record that I refer to, I think this is important to note, accounts for about 99% of the district staff and 99% of the district budget. This means this conversation we're having this evening is about less than 1% of Shawnee Mission staff. So the 6.5 FTE community-funded positions out of 3,700 staff is 0.003% of the district employees. And if you only account for the 2,100 teachers and certified staff, excluding paraprofessionals, whether you count 6.5 FTE or I think the high market, close to 12 FTE, and that's full-time equivalent staff. That is less than 0.5% of all Shawnee Mission teachers and other licensed educators. So again, this conversation is about less than 1% of the district budget. If we look at the total annual donations from the past 3 years, including all 5 attendance areas for staff and faculty, kind of beyond what the scope of this group ended up looking into, the average total amount of donations was $1.5 million a year. And that is still less than 0.5% of the district's operating budget. And that excludes kind of bond and capital outlay in the denominator there. So this year, community-funded positions are 0.001% of the district's operating budget. To be clear, I really do welcome this conversation. I do. But it's important that our community is able to put the donations into perspective. So why do we have community-funded positions in the first place? And for that matter, why do we have grant-funded positions? Because I think the two, from a perspective of a student or a parent, is identical. Bottom line, the Kansas legislature chose to inadequately fund K-12 public education from 2009 through 2023. You're going to hear some common themes from my friend and colleague, Melissa Rooker. I think we spent a lot of time in Topeka together advocating for public education. When the restoration of state aid finally reached, it wasn't until 2023 when the restoration of state aid finally reached full constitutional levels for general education. Districts across Kansas had to cut positions and programs. Equity within the district is highly affected by inadequate state and federal funding. The two are not mutually exclusive. And you can find the history of those cuts on our district website under the budget and finance and the history. Go back and dig in about those cuts. Shawnee Mission had to allocate finite resources to ensure supports for students with disabilities and metered supplemental supports for at-risk learners, in part using a student headcount threshold. I might have this a little bit off, but essentially these community-funded positions are not frivolous or extra, but rather are backfilling critical supports for struggling students. They're basically educational aids or interventions that the state doesn't provide. We're talking about schools that don't meet that threshold. Why would we want to deny educational supports for struggling students just because not enough of their classmates qualify for free and reduced lunch? The needs are there. I ask you to consider a few more numbers. $30 million. This is the depth of cuts that were made to Shawnee Mission alone in 2009 following the recession, not adjusting for inflation. These cuts were made permanent under the 2012 tax experiment that led to years of financial chaos. From 2013 to 2017, districts across Kansas didn't know whether they would be opening their school doors just weeks before the first day of school. District capacity to plan, even for the short term, was nearly impossible. State general education funds to school districts were not restored to full constitutional levels of adequacy and equity until last year, not until 2023. This was under the Gannon State Supreme Court ruling on school finance. Our secondary teachers lived with a 6 out of 7 course load for, maybe 7 years as a direct consequences of choices made by the Kansas legislature, the elected individuals with the authority to determine how much money will be allocated to K-12 public education. So let me put that $30 million into perspective. We had 54 positions and $10 million under ESSER funding annually. So the federal fund Shawnee Mission received to facilitate learning recovery during the global pandemic were about $10 million annually for 54 positions across the district. So several of these positions were used to reduce elementary class sizes by 2. Now think about that again, in terms of the $30 million cuts we've been living with since 2009, and it wasn't until 2018-19 when the state started restoring funding that we as a district could start restoring some of those positions. And think about that in terms of inflation. 4 times potentially the number of positions lost. Another number, at least $12 million. So this is to think about, if we're making a decision, we need to think about what's coming ahead of us. Okay, why would we restrict our options when our state has a history of inadequate funding for public education? And while the Gannon resolution has been put in place and we finally hit adequate funding for general education, Shawnee Mission is still short maybe $12 million, maybe even more than that, when it comes to special education funding. So the annual special education cost to the district, we have yet to be reimbursed by state and federal government. Again, $12 million plus dollars. And those are mandated services. Without these reimbursement, these funds come out of the general operating budget. Another point of uncertainty in our near future that I think it's really important that whatever we decide to do as a group, we keep this in mind, is that so we have built-in, is that the state will be, I'm getting out of order, so I'm sorry, I was trying to stay on track here. The state school finance formula will be re-upped in 2027, or it will be sunsetted. And so there is potential for chaos in our school finance formula in the near future if we don't have the collective will to re-up what has been deemed adequate and equitable by the Kansas Supreme Court. So again, let's be conscious of what is coming in our near future. The current state funding formula is structured with adequacy and equity. So now that we have kind of that full funding, our LOB option is also designed with that same notion in mind. So I bring one other number to you. So the $76 million, this is the supplemental general fund approved by Shawnee Mission voters and the Board of Education to levy local taxes up to 1/3 of the district's general fund. We just kind of voted on this tonight. This $76 million is converted, so you take the amount of money we need to add 1/3 to our general operating budget to build our budget and strengthen the opportunities to create learning opportunities for our students. So the way we get that $76 million is it gets converted into a mill levy across the whole entire district that will generate that targeted amount of funds. So you pick the dollar amount, and that gets converted into the actual mill levy required, the property tax required to generate those funds. Given some of our Shawnee Mission, some of the areas of Shawnee Mission have higher property values, it is probable, highly probable, that those same attendance areas and households contribute more than 20% of the $76 million. The critical point here is that these funds are distributed equitably across Shawnee Mission, following the building needs assessment, outcome data, strategic plan. All of those factors noted in the task force report. We do not silo the local option funds by school attendance area. We Robin Hood it, right? We distribute where the needs are according to the formula and the equity principles of the district. East area is already contributing significantly more to the benefit of all children in Shawnee Mission. So what is the rationale for denying supports for struggling students just because there aren't enough of them to trigger district support? So the way, given our finite resources, the district can move forward in supporting positions across the district for supplemental support is having enough students in those buildings to trigger the positions. So if we have kind of a finite amount of funds in our district, and we preserve them for the needs of our students with disabilities as mandated, and then allocate the remaining resources available for at-risk services to the best of our ability, targeting those students in the schools with that have the greatest number of students with needs. That doesn't mean that there are no students in those other schools that don't live in poverty or that don't struggle to make adequate growth in their educational adventure, their educational path for the year. We saw that Belinda lost the position for the Belinda support for the educational aid was moved from their school to, was removed from that school based on limited need or limited resources of the district, but the need didn't go away. Briar Road has a unique situation where they have 150 extra students in their building. Again, that's not kind of driven by poverty. I'm sorry, I'm going to wrap this up. So, so I want to raise the question, what is the rationale for denying educational supports for struggling students just because there aren't enough of them in their building to trigger district support? The needs are there, and we have a community willing to support those students. And what is the difference between grant-funded positions that bring extra high school counselors to all 4 high schools but east, and the Jobs for America graduate program, JAG, that is present in only 2 of our 5 attendance areas? Those are phenomenal programs. I think all of our students would benefit from those. I think we're fortunate enough to have social workers funded across our entire district. Up until a couple years ago, those were funded by our community-funded positions, by our parents who were making donations, and I think all but one of those 7 unfunded district positions was supplemented by East Area PTAs. I think I would like this board to also consider what would happen or what happens when the soft money goes away, when there's no longer a grant for the high school counselors. Is that something that we want in our district? How would we go ahead and fund those positions or continue supporting those positions if and when that soft money goes away? I would imagine that North and West and South and Northwest would continue to want their students to receive, their seniors to receive support for college applications. Okay, I'm going to jump to closing my thoughts for now. So I like to consider this a kind of a very public exercise in inherent bias, really, and to set and ask our board members to set aside some concerns about appearances. We have students with needs in all of our high schools, in all of our middle schools, in all of our elementary schools. I would like to believe that the board, the Shawnee Mission Board, will align practice and policy to meet the needs of all struggling students and to have those hard conversations to help others recognize the needs of at-risk students regardless of where they go to school, and to consider this recommendation that denies academic support simply because not enough of their classmates live in poverty. I would ask the board to recognize that we are talking about educational aids and interventionists, not a lot of extras, and we are for struggling students, and we are talking about support for a community service program that benefits the greater Kansas City area. Let's truly be thoughtful about this task force recommendation and cognizant of the concern for discouraging all community support. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Mary Sinclair. Board Member Jamie Borgen.
Yeah, Dr. Sinclair, I want to apologize. I did not mean to interrupt you in your presentation. When you said you were disappointed in the task force for not reaching out, I mean, we did, first of all, I apologize. I did not see your request that we reach out to all, excuse me, PTA members. But we did reach out to people within that school because not always the PTA doesn't have sort of the corner on what's happening at all those schools. Of course, they are highly invested, but I did reach out to a couple people who directly are benefiting from community-funded position, one of which was a teacher who said that it feels yucky that she has this position when she knows that other schools don't have a similar opportunity. And I talked to a former PTA president who has also said that she tried to do away with community-funded positions because she also did not feel like it was equitable. So I appreciate, and we did, I believe, hear from all PTA presidents just reaching out in general. So I do think we did some due diligence in trying to figure out what, not just from PTA members, but other people who are impacted by this. So, and I just want to, something that was imparted upon me when I was first joined the board was that when you're on the Board of Education and you're speaking from the dais, you're not speaking as a parent, you're speaking as a Board of Education member who's here to represent all students. And so I think we haven't heard from a single other feeder pattern that has been in support of these community-funded positions, first and foremost. In fact, we've heard from several East area parents who have said, this is wrong, but they're afraid to speak out because, they don't want to be ostracized from their community. So I just wanted to share those, pieces of information with you. And also, if we're worried about funding going away, then we should be very worried about community-funded positions because that will further increase the disparity because I'm guessing not all schools would be able to fundraise like other schools would be able to fundraise. And so therefore, it would make this, discussion even more pertinent, more relevant because some, as Jessica pointed out in her research and the data that we got from the administration, there are simply feeder patterns that cannot raise the same kind of money. And so it would further widen that gap between feeder patterns and that have the opportunity to have special positions versus the ones that simply can't afford it. So, we're all in the same boat together. We're a team, and I think we need to operate as a team and figure out how we can lift each other up and figure out how we can make this a more equitable practice. And I am comfortable with Dr. Grumman and his presentation to the task force and how much intention and thoughtfulness goes into deciding how many teachers need to be at each school. It's not based on, oh, this is what I think my child deserves. I think this is what my child needs. It truly goes back to data and facts. So I'm very proud of our administration for the work that they've done in making sure that all schools have the resources that they need.
And let's let everyone.
You bet. You bet.
And
I have a lot of questions, so I don't know if I should wait until kind of like through Dr. Sinclair's discussion points.
I don't want
you
to.
have questions versus discussion points?
Yeah, so if we're engaging in discussion, yeah, that's fine. I have a lot of questions that I kind of want to run through to just get a better understanding of, well, a lot of things. So, but I can wait for the discussion part. I just didn't want you to think that I was not wanting to talk.
Right.
Thank you.
Looking both sides, discussion points?
I'll just.
If not, I will go back to Dr. Sinclair. Oh.
You bet.
I just wanted to take a moment and share for some context that we just approved a strategic plan as a district born out of more than 1,600 parents, teachers, students, and patrons coming together. And one of the beliefs that's enshrined in that strategic plan is respecting a community's diversity and each individual's dignity demands equitable access. This task force didn't just pluck the concept of equitable access out of the air. I would also note our community didn't say equitable access 99.2% of the time. They said 100% of the time. They didn't say just when times are good. They said all the time. We see incredible things happening in our schools thanks to the generosity of school communities. I know there's kids from Share out there, and that is a phenomenal program. Interventionists are critical for students to learn. Educational aides will make that job easier. There is no doubt about any of those things. But we cannot ignore the fact that the uncomfortable truth is that this is all happening in one set of schools in our community right now. If we truly believe that these positions are critical, necessary, and beneficial for students, which I believe, then it is our job as a district to pay for them with district resources and make them available throughout the district. It shouldn't be, we now have to pass the hat as a community so that our kids can get what they need to be educated appropriately. That is our job as board members. We approved a budget tonight, and it is not lost on me that that is happening in the same context as this conversation. We have the power and we have the responsibility to ensure that our budget actually aligns with the needs of our students. And if we're not doing that, we need to do that as a board. We cannot say, should never say, that children deserve different access to different things depending on the wealth of the community that they live in. The SHARE program is phenomenal. I have a freshman at South. He would really love a program like that. Why aren't we paying for that with district funds and making it available to all students? It cannot be that some of these programs are the privilege of a fortunate few. If these are important for our kids, then we need to provide them to all kids, and we need to pay for them with district resources. There's still so many ways that our community can support our kids. No one is shutting the valve off of ways for parents to support their students. I go to my science nights, I go to the school carnival, I pay for the booster club. There's plenty of ways we can all continue to support our students. We can go to Topeka and advocate for fully funding special education, which is going to help all of our students. But we have a mandate from our community that we are demanding equitable access to education all the time, all the dollars. And that is a job for us as a board. Thank you.
Thank you. Mari, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to echo some of the statements that Ms. Hembry just mentioned. A lot of this in my head has to do with perception. I represent the Shawnee Mission North community, and it is a resounding yes to sunset something like this. Now, pushing back on that a little bit for some of those folks in the community, we have to understand certain things. A lot of what we're talking about is important here. But perception is so significant across the district, and there's resounding support from every other feeder pattern to address this issue. And I just wanted to say I look forward to addressing it in a meaningful manner. Of course, we want to maintain support from our folks that live in our communities, but I do want to encourage folks to, we got to think outside of our own individual communities, look internally, and then walk across 75th or Rowe or Quivira, because that's where it starts. So I think we're all siloed in this school district a little bit because of our feeder patterns. We are different. How we're elected up here is different than our sister school districts in the state, and it makes this challenging. But I just wanted to articulate that the perception is not great. And 1 versus 4 is really challenging right now to sit through. And I don't love it, but I can appreciate this conversation. So I just wanted to chime in right there to communicate that.
Thank you both. I'm going to look to my left.
Okay. Yep. Can I jump in with my questions? Can I? Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Sinclair. Yeah.
And did you want to also do your? I have no comments right now. So I want to take one more stab at maybe coming at this from a slightly different perspective. So I hear what you all are saying, and again, I appreciate the conversation. The job of the state, of the Board of Education, is to help work, based on the recommendation of our administration, to figure out how to allocate the dollars that we are allotted. We have some say in how much the size of our budget because we've chosen to maximize our local taxing authority to 33%. But our budget is determined by this Kansas legislature. And so we have students with needs. If we're not fully funded at the constitutional level to meet those needs by the state, we by definition don't have enough money to go around, okay? We don't have enough, we can't hire enough staff to support and meet all the needs of students. And so the district prioritizes. We are mandated to meet the needs of students with disabilities. We have students who are struggling learners, and there are 11 criteria that the State Department of Education specifies. We get our dollars based on free lunch, our at-risk funds, that's separate from the high-density at-risk. So we get funds for at-risk students, and that's based on those kids who are eligible for free lunch, but the allocation of those dollars is very different, how they get distributed across the district and to meet student needs. There's like 11 criteria. There's a lot of scrutiny that our administrators are under to make that happen. And so if there are not enough staff to go around, you have to base that on where is the greatest need? What buildings have the most kids struggling? And we know there's a correlation between poverty and performance. And so it's no surprise that in the East area where there is less poverty, that the number of students who do have needs living in those communities may not be enough to rise to the threshold of our district being able to allocate a staff because we have finite resources. We cannot meet the needs of everyone. But there are children in those buildings who are struggling, who are living in poverty, and they need supports. And the district doesn't have the resources to fund them. They have to make hard choices, right? Because there isn't enough money. And why would we turn down support from our community members who are willing to meet those needs? We are talking about 6 FTE, educational aides and interventionists, are the primary positions being funded. 1 or less than 1 in each building to meet the needs of those kids because there aren't enough in that building to generate and meet that threshold by the district. They're not doing extra things, right? We're not reducing class sizes. We're just providing supports to struggling learners. Why would we turn that down? And why would we tell our students at Shawnee Mission East not to go provide supports for the greater Kansas City area through community service hours? To me, this is not solving the problem, it's making it worse. And we need to send more people to Topeka who will fully fund special education. That might alleviate some of this problem here. We've already seen a decline in the need for community-funded positions. If you look over time, we're down to 6.5 FTE. And so I think we really need to think about, I appreciate your perception, and you probably are under a lot of pressure in your community to make equity happen. I don't know, Mario, but I think we have to think about the actual students. That's more important than the perception because there are actual students who are struggling. They just don't have as many of their fellow classmates who are in that same level of poverty. And I also want to point out that we had, I think, I responded to 80 emails, and Jamie, I know you jumped in there too, and some others I'm sure did as well, but we had 80-some emails come in from, mostly from the area in which the schools are impacted, and of those 80 or so, 70 or so were in support of continuing community-funded positions, and 10 were not. 2 from the East area, and the majority of responses from the East area were from the students. So I just wanted to share that. Okay.
Thank you, and I want to shift to some questions, probably. I'd like to shift to some questions that may provide more clarity as we're discussing as well.
I've never been known to bring clarity, so I am making jokes when I'm stressed out because that's how I deal with stress. So just to lighten the mood a little bit, not that we're going to be able to lighten it, but in any event, so I really did as big of a review as I've ever done in preparation for this meeting tonight. And I want to preface all of my questions with I want to appreciate the board members on the task force, like all three of you, for your work, which I believe was conducted in good faith and with, the eye on the value of equity that is in our strategic plan and that I think is shared by not only all of the board members here, but by the leadership team and folks throughout our community. And I also want to take a moment to thank and really to express deep appreciation for everyone who reached out to us. I could make a joke about how I probably have more PTSD from being a board member than is appropriate, but I think that there is a collective trauma from the former decade of critical crisis underfunding from the state. And I think that there is potentially a different response from patrons whose kids are on the older end of the spectrum right now, graduating high school, or who have recently graduated, versus those who are coming in with littler ones, because the experience of watching a district that is beloved go from being like the shining place where we truly value education in Shawnee Mission. I grew up here, I went to Brook Ridge, I went to Indian Woods, I went to South, I married an East kid, so from the beginning, a house divided, but we love this community. And I really do believe that there was a collective community trauma to losing millions and millions and millions of dollars of underfunding, of receiving communications from the district that were asking you what it was that you wanted to cut. Did you want to cut nursing hours? Did you want to cut custodial staff? Did you want to cut librarians? Oh, by the way, did you know that our music program in Shawnee Mission used to begin in 4th grade, but now it's 5th grade because we lost that. There's a lot of stuff that we lost that we still haven't started to put back, not for a lack of desire, but for a lack of funds. And this community put literal boots on the ground and sent representatives to Topeka to fight for funding, and sent parents to advocate for funding, sent students to advocate for funding, advocated in Topeka, advocated here at this dais, went on the news, went on the air with radio stations, formed foundations. The amount of work that Shawnee Mission specifically did, I don't think can be understated. And so as a part of that, I think the community-funded positions developed as a response. And I know it's probably a cheap shot to say every time we've had a difficult conversation at this dais, I can draw a straight, bright red line to legislation that was passed in Topeka, but I think that that is in fact the case. And so we still have to grapple with these things. But when you talk about moderators and mediators of an issue, there are outside forces that impacted this and brought it to fruition in the district to begin with. And we're now on the waning end of it and not the waxing end of it. And so I do think that there should be a bit of perspective in that and what the district has been able to do with regards to the budget it's already course correcting, because we're seeing the difference of where we're at with the additional funding. And when I say additional, that is not the right word. The right word is the renewed funding or the restored funding, because it's not additional yet. And in fact, I will say it gets in my craw every single time somebody says that education is fully funded, because what we are getting out of the Gannon settlement, we are taking from to pay for the special education funding that they cut in conjunction with that. So it is better, and I appreciate all the work that everybody's done on that, but it is not, it's never done. So that being said, there are people in this audience who did that work, and there are people in this audience who are protective of this district because their kids are here, but also because they love the district. And we appreciate you, and we appreciate your input, and I thank you for being here tonight, no matter what feeder pattern you're in. That was a lot, but I feel like I just wanted to bring it back to the fact that everybody here is doing this from a good place. So my questions are in part because as someone on the policy committee and as someone who's participated in policy development, I kind of want to have a really good idea of what we're working with regards to the underlying data. I have been on a couple task force for the district, and how this one came into fruition is a little bit different than how I have participated previously. So some of this is from my perspective of what we would normally be doing from the chairs in the policy committee, because when we work on a policy there, it might come from a recommendation from KASB, and so it will have gone through like all of the vetting that happens from KASB's legal team or from whatever districts they had that already had something in place. Or potentially, if it's something that is being recommended by the district administration, it will have had the vetting of the leadership team, and there will be like this buildup of information to kind of help give like the concrete foundation for whatever piece of policy that gets built on top of it. And so my areas of interest are the analysis on impact, the analysis on input, some of the practices that we adopted for the review itself, whether or not we had organizational change input, and then reviews on the impact of comparable policies elsewhere. And if some of these things, if we don't have them, that's fine. I will probably ask the leadership team if it's possible to get some of this information so that we can have it moving forward. But on the first one, on an impact analysis, there's a difference between defining something that's negligible and something that's statistically significant. And so I think there's already been a lot of conversation on the amount at play here and what the percentage is. And so, you know, on its face, I think that would probably strike people as a negligible amount. Not discounting appearances. Like I'm not discounting appearances, but just on its face, I think it appears to be a negligible amount. So did we look to any formulaic processes? Because there are formulas for assessing when an input becomes statistically significant and is no longer negligible. I'm thinking that we probably didn't, because it probably would have been in the presentation, but we can look at those formulas, and we can also look at them to see, like, when do you hit the fulcrum? When does an amount become statistically significant on impacting equity? And I'm not sure we have that number either. Because it would be, I would be interested in knowing that, like, what is the scope? If we're looking at, like, Mr. Westbrook's comment of, like, something that could happen down the line, like, what is the scope? When would it be statistically significant and not negligible? On the input analysis, on the comparability analysis, so I'm going to reference Title I for two points. The first is that we did get a lot of emails referencing that there potentially would be justification for community-funded positions, in part because buildings who receive Title I support have these positions, but buildings who do not receive Title I support do not have these positions. And so I think there is an area of opportunity being presented here on information we need to provide to the community, even just fundamentally on what Title I is. So that it's part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that gets re-upped. It's supposed to be like every 5 years. It's not. But those dollars are to close the gap between buildings that have resources and where there's children that are facing, like, different institutional barriers, homelessness, poverty, and those sorts of things. So when we allocate those Title I dollars, they are supposed to be above and beyond anything that we're allocating anywhere else. That the federal government sends you those dollars to say, you put this on top of what you're already doing. And so that's the first part. Like, they are, the inherent nature of the Title I positions or the Title I funding is that whatever services are, whatever input you're putting into that building is supposed to be more to close a gap. And so it's almost kind of like an arms race to say, well, these buildings have these and our building doesn't, so we need to get these. And it's like, well, then if that building has those, then it's like you have to get more to balance things out. So that's the Title I piece. But then the second piece of that is districts have to do comparability reporting to make sure that when you receive those federal funds, that you're going in with comparable services or comparable funding. And I think the reason that's relevant is that we already have like some of a basis structure to look at what is equitable or not equitable. Like the federal government requires it. Like you have to submit comparability reports, they exist. And so I don't know if the task force included an analysis of what the comparability tests would be for all of our district. You can get them on KSDE's website, but the way it's structured is that you can only look at one building at a time. And what I really wanted to do was look at all of our buildings at once so that I could get the whole picture. And it was just an inconvenient way of assessing the data. And so I think it would be useful if we looked at those as the baseline to say, you know, it's equitable on its face because, I mean, it has to be, like, we have to meet these comparability standards. But I'd like to have the data. There are specific best practices when you're conducting like equity research, and you know, it depends on which school of thought you're following or which expert you're following. But some of those research practices can include tailoring your evaluation to local context, figuring out what your local context is and then tailoring it to that. Incorporating local cultural considerations, including a review of the history of the practice under study, including an examination of whatever power dynamics are at play and under review, cultivating community support and understanding of the need for the evaluation to ensure that the review is not performed exclusively for or by outsiders, but rather is something the community actively is participating in and bringing value to. And I think in this instance, the board could be perceived as the outsider. And so I want to be just careful of that. We represent the community, but when we're coming in to question members of it, they could see us as the outsider. Intentionally taking steps to empower traditionally disadvantaged groups through the evaluation process, considering very carefully what gets included in review and what gets excluded in review, and whether the information that is being excluded is really not necessary or it's being excluded for other reasons. Considering the potential moderators or the mediators, so I mentioned that, moderators are the context under which an effect occurs, and so I think, if nothing else, including that review is important to understand that we're not painting anyone in a negative light. Like, no one is sitting here and saying, I'm really mad that you funded or tried to take care of your kids and my kids didn't. I mean, well, maybe some people are. I can't speak for everyone, but I'm in a really unique spot because by the end of my time as a parent in the Shawnee Mission School District, I will have 3 children having graduated from 3 different high schools, all from the same address. It's a heck of a commute. But and I'm married to an East kid and I'm a South kid, whatever. But I have the good fortune of being in each of these individual communities. And the perspective from each building is very, very different. And when you are living in your community, and if you only are seeing the perspective from one building, you forget that there's like this whole other universe out there. We are one Shawnee Mission, but the cultural differences from one side of the district to the other, I get culture shock walking into some of them because I feel like I don't belong there, and I have been the president of this board. So, it is not insular. It is not like anything with intentionality. I'm just saying including cultural context so that people understand that we are not trying to point fingers. No, in any ways. I know I'm on a tangent, but did we conduct a thorough history of giving in the district? And that to include like the non-tangible benefits of giving to the district. There are so many benefits with regards to community building, relationship building, how we manage crisis in the district that comes from fundraising. And I'm not saying that those then justify other things, but I wouldn't want to lose access to those. And then cultivating community support and understanding. And then organizational change. So this is, I don't think that there is information on the equity research practices and the background information, and that's okay. I just would like to take those into account moving forward to make sure that we're addressing them. On organizational change, every study I read on organizational change, if you want it to be successful, like the number one driving indicator for success for organizational change is leadership buy-in for that. And we have multiple organizations involved in this review. We have 7 PTAs, which have their own incorporating documents, own executive boards. We have individual building education foundations. So those are separate than the district's foundation. These are individual buildings made up of individual community members. And then we have the building leadership teams that are going to be directly impacted by this, and our own leadership team. And I would like to understand from them, what the sense of their commitment to the change might be, or what they think might be the most difficult, or what they think might be gained, because there could be positive gains from it too. But I think we need to have the conversations with each of the leadership spokes to get everybody moving in the same direction, because I think that this could be a very, very high conflict conversation if we don't have all the leaders at least headed in a similar direction. And then finally, a review of other policies. So I know that we referenced that we don't think any other districts in Kansas are permitting community-funded positions, but I also don't think there's any other districts in Kansas who have strictly passed a policy preventing it. And I also think that if we're just calling our umbrella organizations to touch base with them, that we might not be getting all of the information, because I think when I engage with board members from other communities, what I find out from other board members is sometimes radically different than what I might find out as a general practice from KASB. There's always outliers. But that being said, there are a ton of jurisdictions outside of Kansas that have implemented policies like this and have had varying levels of success with it, from extraordinarily negative responses to secessions from districts, splitting districts in two. Austin passed one because Austin in Texas did an equity review, and they were concerned that they were going to lose their $26 million in Title I funding. And so they ended their community-funded positions. They passed a policy to do it. And 6 months later, the Texas legislature passed a law saying that they had to accept community donations and earmark them and use them specifically for what they were earmarked for, which threw Austin at risk of losing their $26 million in federal funds. And I can't imagine the havoc whoever their COO was in trying to figure out how to spend all of that money directly on a specific project. But there's also districts who've done movement towards equity in a way that was successful, and I would like to learn from them. I'd like to learn what their processes were that they put in place to do that. Again, I don't want to say that we're inequitable, but even if what we're dealing with is a perception, I want to know how other places have done it so that it went smoothly. And I think there's opportunity to get additional information there. So those are all my questions about things that we could get or things that we could take into consideration. And I think that the policy review committees, our next meeting is potentially as soon as the 6th, but might be the 20th or 30th of next month. And I know that we have a significant number of policies that were recommended for update and review by KASB. So I don't want to give any indication on like how quick a turnaround time would be. I would like to have some thoughtful conversations with our leadership team on getting like answers to this and how we would go about doing that. I'd like to give organizational leadership from the other organizations an opportunity to reach out, or I will reach out to them, or I will read everything that you submitted previously, but I would like to engage in that conversation so that we can get the information that you will have about your organizations that we do not, because you are those boots on the ground. And then I'm going to ask for grace for everyone watching along or participating in the conversation. I think there's always an opportunity for things to go in a difficult way, but there's really opportunity for things to go well. And when they go well, that's really lovely. So thank you for my opportunity to, I guess, ask a bunch of questions and dominate the mic. So I'll stop. Thanks.
I think we are at a good juncture to welcome additional comments, insight after hearing everyone from the task force, either or all from the task force, since you all are uniquely at the forefront of it.
And can I throw in just some specific questions I'd like to hear about from the task force?
Did you call on me?
Let's go. Yeah, let's get some input from the task force.
I just wanted to briefly note, I think one thing I want us to be really careful about is the idea that this is a change that impacts 7 PTAs, because when you have a perception problem, if that's what we think we have, this is actually an issue that's relevant for all of our PTAs. I think deciding that there's only 1, 2 who have community-funded positions who have, should have an opinion on this is not very respectful of all of our PTAs and funds throughout the district. I think rather than just focusing on what, I would just encourage us to use that all-in one Shawnee mission idea that we want to hear from all of our patrons about this, and not just some at some schools and in some areas.
Thank you. Anyone else from the committee to just?
I think there's follow-up there to make sure that, because we need, I would like to have the opportunity to have everyone that has valuable information to provide it to us on how to make a smooth transition. And it is not about not wanting to communicate with folks in PTAs who don't have the ability to raise this much money, because the vast majority of my time in communicating with PTAs is communicating with PTAs who cannot raise this amount of money. I mean, I live in that. So, and I was actually, I grew up with the kids from the East area who didn't have money, and so they were within that community and struggling. And so there's a whole lot of lived experience that comes to the table, and I respectfully really understand and appreciate that, and I would not speak to them.
I think a question that was asked is, are kids?
Yeah, committee. Gotcha.
I think a question that was asked, are kids' needs being met? Why are we turning away help? Well, there's a lot of schools in Shawnee Mission, and we are doing our best to meet the needs of all students. And again, I feel very, very confident in our administration and the data that they are focused on to provide teachers and resources and aids and every single thing that they have to meet the needs of all students. I'm also very confident in our teachers who are, really planning to meet individual needs of students. I think where there's a little bit of a rub is that there are other schools that don't have the same fundraising capability that are in the same boat. And so that is what I think as a task force we're trying to lean into is it's wonderful that there's so much support. It's wonderful that they can raise, that any school can raise money. But, you know, I had 2 of my children went K through 6 in a Title I school, and I'm so proud of that, and I love that very much. We were proud, at our silent auction, we were proud to raise $2,000. And I know that seems super inconceivable to many PTAs out there, but let me tell you, $2,000 at my sweet little title school was amazing. And there's just not, so we have to figure out how we can meet the needs of all students in the same boat who don't have the same benefit of being able to fundraise. So why are we turning away help? We aren't turning away help. We're trying to figure out how we can help and benefit every student who's in a similar boat rather than students who are just in one feeder pattern.
Thank you. You had comments or questions?
Yes. Did you all deliberate, what is the difference between a community-funded position and why are not grant-funded positions on the plate? So what makes a grant-funded position okay and a community-funded position not okay?
I'll give you an answer. I'll give my shot at an answer. I think grant-funded positions are typically defined by conditions of a grant. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and typically there are factors that will be measured in the offering of that grant to determine if in the grant's offering and in the pilot that's usually conducted from it, if things are made better, or what can we learn from it, and how can those learnings help improve the overall mission of the organization. That's a grant that has got conditions associated with it, and usually comes in that form. It is community funded, I suppose. If you talk about a foundation being a grant-making organization, I don't have any problem, by the way, with community-funded positions if they are funded in the spirit of grant-making, like it was the answer I just offered to the difference between a grant from a foundation or just a community-funded position that doesn't have those factors in consideration.
So do the high school counselors have an endpoint after this evaluation is concluded on impact, and how long has the JAG program been in place in Shawnee Mission?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah,
I would just share, Mary,
because
because our administrative team actually collects data on community-funded positions. David, Jamie, and I did not go through a list of every position and market, grant, community-funded, anything like that. Our administrative team does that, and they do an excellent job of it. And I think a big piece of what they are looking at is whether Mike, you can correct me, or Russ can correct me, but we asked for that data and they had it. And it was largely about whether we have pursued the funding or whether it has been brought to us. Is that accurate, Mike? I know you guys seem to do this already.
That is correct. So our definition of a community-funded position is when the money hits our accounts and we pay for them as an employee of ours. The example that you offered, Dr. Sinclair, the college advisors that are at 4 of our high schools, not at East. That's a K-State grant that we supplement with at-risk funds. And then JAG is another example that, again, they're not our employees. And so by our definition, we don't count them as community-funded positions, but that's simply our definition.
So I would ask this committee or whoever is going to move forward, or maybe it's all of us, is, so example, going after the K-State grant to fund high school counselors. I would argue that there are students at East who could benefit from college counseling. I would argue that there are students who are first-generation college or, some post-secondary education goers. And so while East may not meet the criteria, I'm just, what is the criteria for why it is okay for 4 of our 5 high schools? And if a group of parents through the PTA or some foundation wanted to fund a high school counselor, what is the rationale for saying no to that when you have them in the other 4 high schools? I just need to understand the criteria. Help me make sense of that. Why would we say no to a counselor at East to help kids apply to college if the parents chose to fund it when we have grants for the 4 other high schools?
And I think you're making the equity argument, and I think it's a reasonable argument to make. I mean, these are questions we need to raise and answer. But that is about equity, isn't it? So I will tell you that I wouldn't want to turn down anybody who wants to step up and help things get better with writing a check or volunteering for the schools. I just think we need an orderly way to do it. And I think the administration deserves guidance from the board on this so that these decisions are not made for vague reasons. And vague reasons are not mischievous reasons. It invites inconsistency and it invites distrust. And the secular sacrament I'm talking about here from the very beginning of my earlier remarks is about the sacred trust we build from our community because they trust us to make good decisions on behalf of all students. And we've got to keep that in mind. We got to protect that trust. I know all of you agree with that. But we have to be very, very careful that in this process, we come out the other end with more trust from the community, not less. And we'll do that if we do this right, and I think we can.
I have two other quick pieces. I'll be quick. It is a complex issue, so I appreciate everyone's patience in going through this. It was, a big topic to delve into. So not every district is participating in a PTA, may or not have a PTA. And so I would encourage, if part of the metric or the bar is that no other district in the state is accepting community-funded positions, I think it kind of begs the question of, okay, what extra funds are we going to accept or not? And to put criteria around that, I think we are starting to flush that out. But to recognize that if we're looking at practices at other districts, look at those other funded positions, not just necessarily community-funded positions, because not every district has a PTA. So I don't think it's really super relevant. I guess the other piece I would be concerned is that, so I'll make this my last one for now. So if you're a parent and in a community and you're looking to fund the positions next year so we are talking about, I think you talked about a transition through this school year. So the positions in place would remain this school year. But there is a potential that next year we would no longer accept community-funded positions. So it kind of has a chilling effect on the fundraising activities that would need to happen this year if schools were to look to have those positions again next year, should the need be there. And so I would also consider this group to think about whether or not, if the deliberation is going to take a while, to put the effect date in the school year 26-27, so that if there is an opportunity for next year, our communities are clear on the capacity to fundraise this school year, because you have to have the money to get approval to, by the end of the school year to do things next year. So that would be the other piece I would throw out there. Because right now there is a very serious chilling effect.
Can I ask a question to Dr. Schumacher? Is that right? Dr. Schumacher, when you reached out to, in addressing Dr. Sinclair's point about, how are positions funded within other districts, whether it be PTA or community, when you talk to other districts, specifically in Johnson County, about community-funded positions, was there any feedback on, do PTAs provide positions, or could you provide a little bit of clarity around that question? Or
that wasn't my question. I don't know whose question it was, but it wasn't mine.
Or that point that was discussed.
Yeah, I'll try to answer your question. If I don't, clarify it for me. So when I reached out to the Johnson County superintendents, I asked the question, do you have community-funded positions or policies that prohibit community-funded positions? And the answer to both of those questions was no. After that, we didn't have any additional conversation. So to Ms. Owsley's point, no one really has any policy prohibiting community-funded positions. It's just simply, it's not a practice of theirs, at least in Johnson County.
Thank you.
And I can't say for certain that it's across the state. We sampled a few other districts outside of Johnson County. I can't say unequivocally that it's every district in the state of Kansas, but the ones we sampled,
I
that
appreciate
was
it.
true. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, looking to the left and to the right. Any other?
Good job, April.
Staying neutral? No. I just want to just add that we're human, and of course, we do the best that we know to do with what we have to do it with. Thank you. Of course, we all will be impacted. You know, I kind of saved my comments till now because I represent West. But we all will be impacted, and we feel that even now. And the impact, I think specifically, will be as a result of this is just change, major, but it's change, and we're feeling it from building to leadership to board, executive. But we're at a good juncture where we can still move forward, right? We can still move forward. I believe that, and be successful in that. You all, the task force, talked to the data that was provided. Great, right? We'll build from that, right? And so at the end of this discussion for today, I still end with hope. And I hope that we all can agree on that as we move forward. Turning it back over to you, President Sinclair.
Thank you. All right, so this brings us to the consent items. We have 7.1 to 8.6. There are no bond consent. It's just consent general. I seek a motion to approve.
Move approval, Hembry.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Borgman.
All right, thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, we have 7 action items. Item 9.1, approval of purchase of winter, spring, fall, high school and middle school athletic uniforms. Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, thank you. I recommend for approval the purchase of the 24-25 winter, 25 spring, and 25 fall uniforms for the 5 high schools and middle schools totaling $289,138.10, which includes a 5% contingency to cover any unforeseen circumstances. This is a budgeted capital expenditure utilizing the BSN Under Armour Reward Program Agreement. Just to note, we've established a 5-year cycle for all of our extracurricular programs to receive new uniforms on a regular basis. This is something that I think we should be quite proud of, that we're able to do this for our students.
Thank you. Do I have a do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval, Hembry.
Second, Borgman.
All right, all in favor? Oh, any discussion?
Yeah, I have a question, actually.
Yes, Ms. Borgman.
Dr. Schumacher, with regards to the uniforms, I can't remember, do booster clubs play a part? I feel like at Shawnee Mission Northwest, we're very involved with the soccer booster club, and I feel like we can fundraise for like sweatshirts and stuff, but this is just for uniforms only, is that right?
Yeah, I may call on Dr. Stubblefield to help me with this, but this would be just the baseline uniforms that we deem appropriate to compete. Any extras, warm-ups, things like that, that a booster club would try to support would be on top of that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate, just competition uniforms.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Question.
I'm sorry, I was like looking to April. Sorry, that, I got the phone back. Okay, yes.
Can
sorry.
you, Dr. Stubblefield, tell me what role do our high school coaches, any coach, have in the choosing or design process? Is it a baseline, like, they get what they get, or is there some type of, involvement that they have? If not a big deal, just curious.
Yeah, I am not sure
Not sure,
of the
okay.
process that they go about in terms of selecting their uniforms. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, that there may be some input from some of the senior student leadership in those sports, maybe upperclassmen.
So there is
along with
input.
coaches.
We don't know what input looks like, but there's some input.
Yes.
Great.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item 9.2, approval to renew the manager MDM subscription.
Yep. I recommend approval to renew the subscription of Mosel Manager in the amount of $1 million. This is a budgeted and planned capital outlay expenditure and will be completed via 4 annual payments of $250,000. Mosel Manager provides SMSD with the mobile device management platform for all of our Apple devices. The renewal license agreement will cover 35,000 devices from September 5th of this year through September 5th of 2028. The Board of Education approved the licensing contract for Mosel Manager with an initial purchase back in August of 2018. This is a necessary purchase that enables proper management of our Apple devices and their associated applications. Mr. Drew Lane, our Executive Director of Information and Communication Technologies, is present if you have any technical questions that Dr. Stubblefield and I won't possibly be able to answer.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Ashley.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Hembry.
All right. Any questions for Dr. or for Mr. Lane? Dr. Lane? Anyone? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Explanation well done. Thank you for being here. Item 9.3, resolution to adopt the LOB percentage, as we have been discussing this evening.
Yeah. I recommend adoption of the LOB percentage of 33%. All boards of education shall adopt annually a local option budget percentage resolution as required by KSA 725143. The board is authorized to adopt a maximum LOB percentage of 33% by election on January 27th of 2015. I think that's of note. Mr. Knapp and district administrators have shared with the board and our public since this spring the process of budgeting, and the 33% LOB is built into that budget for the 24-25 school year.
Okay.
Move approval. I'm sorry.
Oh, hang on. And so, Shelley, please remind me, do we need to read this resolution and then approve first and second the resolution? Do we? I'm sorry, I should have remembered.
I think that's been our practice to read the resolution.
Okay, so let's do that, and then we'll take a first and second. So, Ms. Board Narona, can you
Yes, I can.
do that for me?
Okay. Unified School District Number 512, Johnson County, Kansas. Be it resolved that the above-named school board shall be authorized to make a local option percentage in an amount of 33% for the 2024-25 school year. This is to certify that the above resolution was duly adopted by the Board of Education of Unified School District Number 512, Johnson County, Kansas, on the 26th day of August 2024.
All right, do I have a second?
Second, Hembry.
All right, all in favor, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, item 9.4, adoption of the 2024-25 budget. Just a little task.
Yeah, this is a long one. Excuse me, I recommend approval of the total published budget in the amount of $611,930,693 for the 24-25 school year. Each year, the Board of Education shall conduct an assessment of the educational needs of each attendance center in the district. Such profiles and needs assessment has been published, and it is on our school district's website. The profiles and needs assessment has been provided to the board, was evaluated by the board, and used by the board in the approval of this district budget. The district's budget summary and the proposed budget, the needs assessment, and the state assessment documentation is on file here at the CAA and available on the school district's website under Budget and Finance. Just to say again that our budgeting process begins in December as we start with the needs assessment at the local level, and we begin staffing discussions around programs that are the most impactful. These conversations continue throughout the spring and really culminate as we complete our negotiations with our professional employees and finalize those pay scales for the remaining employees, employee groups. So a lengthy process that culminates tonight.
It was a lot of work, and I've lost my screen here. So can someone tell me if there is a resolution associated with that? And if not, I'll take a first and second.
No resolution.
Right, there's no resolution.
There's a resolution.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
I'll move approval.
Thank you. Do I have all right. Any further deliberation?
Mary, may I make one comment?
Yes,
I've just been
please.
terribly impressed with the process here. This is my first full year on the board, and I've watched the process both as an elected person, not yet in office, and then joining the board in January. It's an extraordinarily thorough, transparent process. And I tip my hat to the administration for following it and for the way it is built from the school up to the board, not vice versa. So congratulations on a terrific process.
All right, thank you for that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item 9.5, approval of contract for our healthcare services, staffing services.
Yeah, so this is, I recommend approval for the contract with Amerigus Healthcare Staffing Services from Omaha, Nebraska for provision of nursing and supplemental school staffing on an as-needed basis for the 24-25 school year, including the extended school year program. Based on projected need for one-to-one nursing, extended staff absences and vacancies, payment for certified, classified, and related services is estimated to not exceed $780,000. This will be paid from the special education operating funds. And if you will remember at our last board meeting, we had several of these. We were waiting on this contract, and so this is in the same vein as each of those as well.
Thank you for that explanation, too. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval, Borgman?
Second?
Second, Boyd and Arona.
All right. Any further questions?
I have a
Yes,
question.
Ms. Bergman?
Dr. Schumacher, with regards to the nursing, how are we doing with regards to staffing our nurses at our schools?
I think we're pretty good, but I'm looking towards Dr. Higgins. He's nodding his head.
Fully staffed.
Oh, nice, okay.
Yeah.
Is this the same, I don't remember this group from previous years, is this the
Sherry,
first?
you want to elaborate?
Yeah, they have a new Amerigist. It used to be, was it Maxim, right? Maxim Healthcare, and now it's Amerigist.
Okay, that's,
Name change.
okay, thank you.
Great question. Okay. We've had a first and second, yes?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right, 9.6, approval to renew the medical insurance program with Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Yep. I recommend renewing the medical insurance program with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City effective January 1 of '25 with a 9.5% increase to most premiums while increasing the district contribution to $894 per month. This cost will be paid from all fund sources that include personnel. As Dr. Higgins mentioned, this cost has been negotiated in the spring with the Benefits Committee, and we agreed through negotiations to these rates and district contributions. This action formalizes the agreement with Blue Cross of KC.
Okay. Do I have a first? A motion to approve?
So moved, Ashley.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Boyd and Arona.
All right. Any discussion on these all 9 documents and attachments? And thank you to all the work that went into creating those documents.
I do.
Ms. Borgman?
It feels like 100 years ago that we had the initial discussion on this. So this 9.5, this was what the Benefits Committee, correct, Dr. Schumacher? This is the one
9.6.
that they're recommending?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so this is teacher approved,
It is.
staff approved? Okay, great.
Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 9.7, our final action item, approval of update to Board of Education Manual of Procedures. I don't know if we want to stay with me here or bounce it back. Okay.
I think it's you.
So this is our board manual, kind of our operating rules of how we engage with one another in the service of to the district as board members. And we had a number of changes and updates that we made to it and a discussion at the retreat. And so this is that document that we've had in front of us. So I'm going to seek a motion to approve and a second, and then we can take conversation if there is any.
So moved, Ashley.
All right?
Second, Westbrook.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah, Ms.
I just wanted to thank Ms. Trenholm. Thank you, Trenholm. Thank you so much for completing the red lines on this. You really brought it home for us. So thank you very much for making sure that this was all buttoned up. And we had a great discussion as a board regarding the procedures. And I look forward to the changes. I don't know if someone wants to discuss a couple of them, but.
I'd say thank you for also, Ms. Borgman, for kind of shepherding this process. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, I'm looking.
Dr. Sinclair, do you want to talk about any of the changes that were made for the public, or is it not relevant, do you think? Just with the president election date change? Or?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the most significant, or the most kind of substantive change, there was a lot of kind of just language cleanup here, but we will be changing the election of president and vice president to the July cycle rather than January. I think for a while there was a preference for incoming board members to have immediate voice in who would be serving as leadership, but that also is a challenging piece to do when you're brand new to the role in the middle of a school year. And so that there are pros and cons to whichever cycle you adopt, and I think this group collectively feels like July will work better for our group. And so we are moving those elections to the July to June cycle. I think that was probably the biggest change there. Thank you for that reminder, Ms. Borgman. Anything else you can think of?
I think that was the big one.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I will take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All right. So that brings us to board comments. Item 10.1. Does anyone have any? Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Garcia?
So we are back to school, and a lot of kiddos and families and teachers and parents are getting sick, so let's remember to practice safe, healthy habits in our lives, like washing hands and masking when we need to and things of that nature. I mean, I've heard a lot on the ground about kiddos getting sick, so just wanted to be sure to communicate that out. That's still significant to us up here. Let's make sure it's significant to everybody in the district that we want to keep our kids healthy, because when they're healthy, their butts are in those seats, and when they're in those rooms, growth happens. So let's make sure we're doing our best up here.
All right, great PSA. Any other comments? I'm looking left. Mr. Westbrook, Ms. Housley.
I just want to take a short
Oh, I'm sorry,
moment.
Ms. Hembry.
It's okay.
I was going to come back.
I just want to take a short moment to thank this board for engaging in a hard conversation up here. I think I said at our very first meeting of the donations task force meeting, that the easiest thing to do is always to keep on doing what you've always done. And I think there's real value in being part of a governing body that can ask the right questions for the right reasons, and I think that's what we have done. It was hard. This is a hard topic. It's hard to leave the first ever task force this board has ever had. But I want to especially thank, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, there's been multiple task force.
Oh, since I've been on the board, we've never had one, so I have no point of reference. But I'm sorry. I wanted to thank David and Jamie for being along for the ride with me. Thank you.
Can I chime in really quick?
You bet.
Not to diminish what everybody has been saying up here, as we've talked for 4 hours now. They're very challenging things that we have to do as a board. I'm grateful that we have each other to support us and talk through these things, but let us keep in mind that we just lost a student, and that is hard. That is the challenge, and that is something that we need to keep in our mind as we're up here talking about some of these things that are happening in our district, things that affect a lot of people for a lot of different ways, but let us not forget truly some of the most important, if not the most important thing outside of educating our students for better lives for them. But when something like this happens, tragedy hits, we need to be sure to come back around a little bit. And so I just wanted to say that, not to bring down the mood, but the harsh reality of our jobs is living within the realm where these things happen and people will look to us, but my prayers go to that family, and want to ensure that we communicate that outwardly here, that there are very important things happening. Let's make sure we're being mindful of some of the most challenging ones.
Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Borgman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Garcia. So that is, I asked Dr. Sinclair if I could sort of have the last sort of comment, because Yvette's funeral was today, and he was a very special member of the Northwest community, not only Yvette, but his brother as well, of which my daughter is friends with their family, and many others. And this has been very hard on the Northwest community, especially those football players that sat with him, that didn't understand what was happening, that we're giving, there's just a lot to unpack and a lot of trauma there for a lot of kids. And so I am thankful for a lot of support that other schools, like Shawnee Mission South has done, for example. I'm sure many others, but Shawnee Mission South specifically, they wore orange one day in support of Northwest, which just meant so much. And again, I'm sure there are many other schools that did the same. So at the end of the day, that's what matters. And squeeze your kids extra tight, because you just never know when something like this might happen in your community to someone you love. And it's just a really rough day for the Northwest community. So my heart goes out to all the teachers, not only teachers at Northwest, but it's interesting to see just even on my Facebook feed, just teachers that had them in elementary school and middle school. And so oftentimes we just think about Northwest, but it's not just Northwest, right? It's all of the teachers that really loved him, and he just was a happy guy and, always one to joke, and his family was very, very supportive of the football program. They, last year, someone shared that his mom made this amazing, authentic Mexican dinner for the whole football team, where she, just went over the top and just to love on these kids. And so now it's our turn to love on her and her family. And so, maybe do a random act of kindness for someone just in his spirit. So thank you.
All right. So with that, I will close our board meeting, and we'll see you all on September 9th. Thank you all for being here and staying late.